After the release of my last video, an anonymous tip was sent to my business email with a video idea. Their message provided no details on the proposed story beyond just the fighter's name and a single line of context explaining that she was a highly ranked active fighter. Since I began covering fighting frauds on this channel, I've had plenty of tips sent to me, but most of them go nowhere. Usually there's not enough proof, not enough fight footage, or just not enough of a story to justify a full video. I assumed that this would be another dead end, but the fact that the tipster had gone out of their way to use an anonymous email service had me intrigued. So I started digging into the record of the fighter, a woman by the name of Angelina Lucas, and what I found was truly shocking. On paper, she appeared like a perfectly legitimate world champion boxer, holding an impressive record of 16 wins to just one defeat. She has won titles from a variety of organizations, including the WBC, and has even climbed as high as the number 2 rank in the world on BoxRec for her weight class, currently ranking in number 4 as of February 2026. Her success also extends outside of the ring, as she boasts a massive 3 million followers on Instagram. That's more than Amanda Serrano and Katie Taylor combined. This huge support has allowed her to attract major sponsorships, and she has hordes of men from the Russian-speaking world flooding her comments to support her for her boxing brilliance and other things. But once I started watching a few of her fights and researching her background, I could barely believe what I was watching. Every time I felt like I'd found all of the controversy surrounding her, something even worse was hiding around the corner in her next fight. This includes allegations of death threats against her opponents, fake doping violations used to erase losses, the dirtiest fighting style I have ever seen while every ref pretends that they didn't see anything, multiple incidents of biting opponents, and one of the most suspicious fights I have ever seen where an opponent clearly winning is pulled out of the fight by her coach for absolutely no reason. This video tells the story of boxing's world champion Barbie and the sinister dark trail of controversy and scandal that follows her everywhere she goes as she tries to rise to the top of boxing. Let's get into the video. Angelina Lucas's boxing career began as a teenager in the amateur ranks, and she flashed some promise early, winning 3 national Kazakhstani youth titles and competing at several international tournaments. As she progressed from the youth national team to the adult team, she had her sights set on one day making the Olympic Games and winning a medal for her country. But her amateur career would fall apart in bizarre fashion as she was banned from the team after all of her teammates and her coach signed a letter calling for her expulsion. Angelina would claim that jealousy of her abilities in the ring and the wins she was racking up had led the entire national program to turn against her, causing bitter disputes with her teammates and the coach to the point that they'd forced her out of the team. After getting booted out, Angelina released a lengthy statement alleging she was bullied while on the team and also accused her teammates of doping and being unprofessional by drinking and partying too much. With amateur boxing bridges now fully burned, she would be forced into making the transition to the professional side of the sport. Trying to make a career as a female professional boxer can be a daunting task given the lack of money available in the sport, particularly when you're already coming from a relatively low-value market like Kazakhstan. But Angelina Lucas had one major asset up her sleeve. She is very attractive. That might sound patronizing to mention, but given she'd racked up a monster 500,000 Instagram followers before even making her pro debut, it would be stupid not to mention it. Such huge levels of support meant that promoters were more likely to see potential dollar signs, and Angelina would get a strong push from the start of her career, making her debut on a major Kazakh arena show. Unfortunately for Angelina, the controversy surrounding her career began in her very first fight, albeit a minor controversy compared to the insanity of her most recent fights. This was a 4-round bout, and I personally scored it either a draw or a win for her opponent, as Angelina struggled to land anything of note despite pressuring the entire fight. But unsurprisingly, the Kazakhstani hometown judges gave Angelina all 4 rounds in an undeserved win. Ultimately, this is the kind of hometown judging decision that occurs all the time in boxing, but the fact she struggled to stand out in a fight against a boxer who currently has a 4-8 professional record does not bode well for her future career. Perhaps scarred by the narrow escape of her debut, Angelina would take almost a year out of the ring to hone her skills before returning in 2022, quickly adding another 2 wins to her record to bring her to 3-0. Unfortunately, there is no footage of these fights, but with both of her opponents retiring mid-fight, we can only hope that they were not controversial wins. This 3-0 start against pretty low-level competition earned Angelina a title shot at the vacant WBC International Bantam title, with a fight against Anna Arrezola, who was 43 years old and on a 4-fight losing streak. This fight would see the introduction of Angelina's trademark fighting style, which includes cheating by any means necessary, whether that's hooking her opponent's head, pushing off her opponent's face when told to break, sticking her elbow in her opponent's face, or just plain pulling her opponent's head down repeatedly. Lucas edged the first few rounds against an opponent who seemed half asleep, but when Arrezola was deducted a point for low blows, which does seem a bit harsh given Angelina's belt line is literally up to her chest, she suddenly woke up and dominated Angelina for the remainder of the fight, unable to miss with her left hand. I gave every close round to Angelina Lucas to try and avoid being biased against her, but even with the point deduction for her opponent, I had Arrezola winning by a clear 3 points. This was not a particularly hard fight to score, but the judges were clearly impressed with Angelina's dirty fighting style as she somehow managed to con a split decision victory, with one judge giving her an absolutely insane 8-round margin of victory. The look on her opponent's face says it all, just another day in boxing. With that robbery, Angelina had now earned herself a WBC belt in just her 4th ever fight. How impressive. She followed this up with another win in a fight without footage and netted another belt in the process. But the good times were soon to be disturbed by a Chilean fighter by the name of Daniela Asenjo. Daniela was by far the most accomplished boxer Angelina had faced to date, and choosing to fight her was a bold call, given the only 2 fights I'd actually seen her in, Angelina had required awful judging to get her the win. But with another WBC belt on the line and plenty of dirty tricks up her sleeve, Angelina and her team believed that they had what it took to overcome Daniela. It was through watching her fights that I really developed a dislike for Angelina, because she cheats so constantly and so blatantly and yet never gets punished by the refs for it. In this fight, there was countless examples of her hitting after being told to break, pushing her opponent's head down, and hooking her opponent's head to allow her to land punches, all while the ref just watches. But despite all this cheating, Angelina was comprehensively outboxed and outclassed to such an extent that even her team, who you will later see are as shameless as it gets, couldn't bring themselves to celebrate as if Angelina had won when the fight ended. It seemed destined for another robbery on the scorecards, especially when the local Turkish judge scored the bout a draw, but mercifully, the Swiss and Irish judges correctly gave Daniela Asenjo her deserved win, delivering Angelina the first loss of her career. This loss was a bitter blow to Angelina Lucas and her team, with her brand being built on her Barbie looks and boxing champion credentials, a winning Instagram formula that had landed her sponsorships with the likes of Chinese car brand Sherry and dodgy gambling site 1xBet, to name just a few of her many sponsors. Her team had hoped to keep building her up and riding the gravy train of attention she generated, but Daniela Asenjo beating Angelina had dented their plans. But while Daniela was smiling now, Angelina and her team were intent on revenge, and they would keep the rematch in their sights for the future, and when it arrived, they would stoop to incredibly unhinged levels to settle the score. But with her O now gone, Angelina focused on rebuilding with a series of easy fights against low-level opponents, such as Roma Yousaf, who sported a shiny 5-1 record, but all of her 5 wins came against fighters who had never won a fight before. Unsurprisingly, Angelina made light work of these opponents, including Indian boxer Mamta Singh in a fight for the WIBF and WBF titles. The prestige of these titles is summed up by the fact her opponent had a 5-1 record, but all of her opponents combined had just 1 win. I guess even if the belt is a bit meaningless, it still looks cool when you post on Instagram to your 3 million followers with a ton of different belts. The Mamta Singh fight in particular was quite funny and shows the level of cherry picking that was going on, with her opponent looking absolutely tiny compared to Angelina and displaying very little skill, which is unsurprising given she was plucked from the Indian regional boxing scene and flown over to Thailand specifically to lose to Angelina for the belts. There were bizarre scenes in the fight as her outmatched opponent seemingly tried to quit in the 5th round, then started fighting back, then tried to quit again, before the ref finally stepped in and made the decision for her, ending the fight. I know the belts are somewhat meaningless, but Mamta Singh had no business being in this fight, and she was clearly cherry-picked purely because her 5-1 record looks good at face value and her team knew she posed no real danger to Angelina. Eventually, however, with her stat padding odyssey complete, the competition would pick up with a fight in Thailand against 21-2 Argentinian Deborah Lopez. In the intro of this video, I promised crazy scandals and controversy, and I swear as Angelina gets more desperate, we will get to the complete craziness. But please bear with me for perhaps the most egregious cheating I have ever seen in a fight. I genuinely could have put together a 10-minute compilation of all the dirty tactics Angelina used in this fight, as she continually pulled her opponent's head down over and over and over again, even after being warned by the ref multiple times. But she didn't just stop there. She got in 2 blatant punches after being told to break that went unpunished.
Where this is what Angelina likes to do. She likes to make it scrappy, and again, hitting after the bell. Now, the referee needs to do something now because...
And then for the cherry on the cake, there was a ridiculous 4 incidents where it looked like Angelina tried to bite her opponent, with these 2 being the most suspicious looking clips where it's hard to see what else she could be trying to do. The ref warned her repeatedly for her cheating, but he never took a point away, instead deciding to deduct a point from Angelina's opponent for punches to the back of the head. Of course, Angelina would never punch to the back of the head, and definitely not right in front of the same referee's face. The fight was a complete scrappy mess thanks to Angelina's tactics, and it was almost impossible to score. But besides her constant cheating, Angelina landed almost nothing of significance, and she should have either been disqualified or at least had several points deducted. But this is boxing, so of course all 3 judges unanimously declared Angelina Lucas the winner, and she celebrated like she'd won the World Cup. And in a sick twist of fate, 2 of the judges had Angelina winning by just 1 point, with that 1 point margin of victory being the point taken away from her opponent, who did not cheat even 5% as much as Angelina. Without the unjust points deduction, the result would have been declared a draw. With such a cruel and unjust outcome, is it any surprise that Deborah Lopez has seemingly walked away from boxing and potentially retired at the age of just 30? Although Angelina Lucas had another unjust win in the bag, there was a major problem beginning to develop for her. Whenever she stepped up in competition, she was needing to rely heavily on biased judging, bad refereeing, and blatant cheating just to get the win. And if she was going to continue this boxing grift, she would either need to be willing to accept that she would eventually lose, or she would need to massively ramp up her cheating and dirty tactics to keep the wins coming in. And it was in her next fight that she and her team would leave it in no doubt the path that they intended to take, with a truly shameless bout that highlighted both her lack of skill and her determination to make it to the top at any cost. On face value, her unbeaten 9-0 opponent, Aisat Oriyomi, seemed like a respectable fighter for Angelina to test herself against. But dive a bit deeper into Oriyomi's record, and it becomes clear Angelina's team were likely looking for a nice cherry-pick win to keep her record rolling. Oriyomi's 9 wins had all come from the Nigerian boxing scene, and her opponents had a combined record of 5 wins and 34 defeats. Given Angelina had contended for international titles, this was, on paper, someone she should defeat decisively. But that wasn't even close to what occurred. In fact, Oriyomi, in her first fight outside of her native Nigeria, absolutely dominated Angelina through the first 3 rounds, looking comfortably the better fighter. But instead of cruising to a win, there was a massive issue after round 3 that ended the fight. Despite the fact Oriyomi was not even breathing heavily, her corner took the extraordinary decision to pull her out of the fight, citing fatigue, with the look of disappointment evident on the fighter's face, knowing the absolute BS that was being pulled with her career against her will. It was clear that her trainer, who had his phone in his hand the entire fight, had likely been given the instruction to pull Oriyomi out of the fight as soon as possible, as she was looking like she'd win by such a margin that even the judges couldn't save Angelina. This fight was a complete embarrassment, but hey, at least Angelina got a nice photo for Instagram with her belts and her hand raised after this diabolical performance. The nonsense would keep coming, with more wins marred by constant cheating that was ignored by the ref, but it was her 15th career bout that would mark a new low in the career of Angelina Lucas. It was a bizarre fight to be arranged in the first place, given her opponent Yesenia Toko had a record of just 1-0, with her only career fight taking place 4 years before she was flown all the way from Bolivia to Turkey just to box Angelina. I have no idea how they even found this random 1-0 Bolivian boxer, but this was a clear attempt at a cherry pick. But despite the huge gap in experience, Angelina would still need to rely on fighting dirty, deploying her usual tactics of punches to the back of the head and forearms to the face. But Angelina would up the ante massively in this fight with a truly blatant bite on her opponent. And this time the bite is not even debatable. You can literally hear her opponent wince in pain and point out that she's been bitten.
Kaç saat uçtu geldi ben çok iyi biliyorum.
Bolivya'dan geldi.
Bolivya'dan geldi, gece geldi.
Ve bu arada bir sakatlık var galiba.
Helpfully, the broadcast would also even provide a replay, and the thumbnail for this fight on YouTube highlights Angelina's blatant bite. How shameless can you get to cherry pick a fight with a 1-0 fighter who hasn't fought for 4 years, and yet still need to rely on biting her in the second round just to try and get a win? Unsurprisingly, given it was clear the ref had no interest in stopping Angelina from cheating, her opponent decided to quit at the end of the second round after being bitten, providing yet another shameful black mark on the career of Angelina Lucas, who unbelievably didn't even have the dignity to show respect to her opponent after the bout, leaving her in tears. I can't lie, this was the fight that truly turned me into a full-blown hater. The combination of disgusting cheating and corruption, along with her zero sportsmanship, just makes her an incredibly unlikable boxer. But amazingly, from this low point, things get even worse if you can believe it. I mentioned earlier in the video that while Daniela Asenjo had got the W over Angelina in their first fight, the war was far from over, and Angelina and her team had revenge on their mind, with the rematch finally scheduled. After getting comprehensively outboxed in their first fight, her team knew they needed to go the extra mile if they were going to win this fight, and oh boy did they go all out to ensure Angelina would avenge her defeat. Before going further, I must stress that the following allegations are unproven and are vehemently denied by Angelina and her team. The rematch was arranged to take place in Angelina's home country of Kazakhstan, but even getting to Kazakhstan would prove to be a challenge for Daniela, who was flying all the way from Chile and relying on several connecting flights. Unfortunately, the ticket for her final connecting flight to Kazakhstan was mysteriously cancelled at the last minute, forcing her to travel via Uzbekistan and drive for 6 hours to finally reach Angelina's home city, arriving a day later than she had planned as a result. But things took a much darker twist when the fight promoter paid a visit to Daniela's hotel room. Looking extremely nervous, the promoter immediately began putting dollars onto the hotel bed before explaining that Daniela had to lose this fight. Otherwise he would be killed, and Daniela and her coach wouldn't be allowed to leave the country and would be putting themselves in serious danger. As the fight drew closer, the intimidation continued, with Daniela and her team refused access to inspect Angelina's gloves or watch her hands get wrapped. As Daniela made the walk to the ring in a country she knew nothing about, her mind was about as far away from winning the fight as it possibly could be, scared that accidentally winning could lead to life-changing consequences for her. The fight commenced, but with Daniela terrified by the idea of winning, it was nowhere near the same performance as their first fight, with her mind only on getting out of the fight unscathed. After putting in a half-hearted performance, Daniela opted to retire after 6 rounds, keen to get out of Kazakhstan as soon as possible and handing Angelina her revenge on a silver platter. Now it must be said that 1, these allegations are unproven, and 2, even if they are true, it doesn't necessarily mean that Angelina Lucas herself was aware of what had been happening. She has a big team around her with a vested interest in keeping her profile high so the money keeps rolling in. But it's hard not to cringe seeing her act like a national hero after the fight, knowing all the cheating that it took to get her there. The death threats were reported to the sanctioning body, the IBO, and they offered Daniela a rematch with Angelina. But understandably, Daniela would decline the rematch offer and move on with her career. If you have to go to the lengths of issuing death threats to your opponents to get wins, maybe it's time to take a long hard look in the mirror and ask if boxing is really for you. But after hitting new lows, Angelina would decide to continue the grift of pretending to be a world-class boxer for her Instagram followers, and she and her team would get increasingly desperate to cover up her lack of skill. The next fighter in her crosshairs was an American by the name of Catherine Lindenmuth, who was 7-5 and again in theory should have been a comfortable win for a 15-1 fighter with international experience like Angelina. But that didn't stop Angelina and her team from making life as difficult as possible for her opponent. For this fight, which took place in Egypt, their shenanigans included lying about the weight the fight would take place at to try and allow Angelina to come in heavier. This meant a brand new fight contract had to be signed just one day before the fight to rectify the weight issue. And when it came time to weigh in, there was also alleged manipulation of the scales. The organisers also tried to allow Angelina to wear a thinner pair of gloves while insisting Lindenmuth should use a significantly more padded pair of gloves, with this dispute only resolved when the WBA sanctioning body stepped in. Unfortunately, the only video of this fight that I can find is a choppy and unwatchable mess, so ascertaining who deserved to win is nearly impossible. But the fight would end, surprisingly, with Lindenmuth getting the win on the scorecards, suggesting that she must have dominated the fight to have overcome the judging corruption that has followed Angelina throughout her career. When Angelina had taken her loss to Daniela Asenjo, it was a loss that she accepted on the night, albeit with her team keeping one eye on eventually avenging that loss by any means necessary. But with Angelina Lucas now fully involved in the dark arts of the boxing business, this was not a loss that she or her team was willing to accept. In the video of her opponent getting her hand raised, you can immediately see Angelina's manager is visibly pissed off and begins confronting someone. The rest of the fallout is not captured on camera, but allegedly, he and the rest of her team immediately became embroiled in a massive shouting match with the judges and officials, trying to intimidate them into reversing their decision after their golden girl had finally taken a much-deserved L. But there was no prospect of the judges changing their decision, so her team and the promoter would get desperate and start working on other ways to get the decision overturned. Lindenmuth waited around after the fight to complete a drugs test, even as Angelina and her 20-man strong team were creating a very hostile atmosphere, enraged at their loss. But no drugs tester ever arrived, and it was the same story as her hotel, with no tester arriving to take a sample at any point. Eventually, Lindenmuth took her flight home to the US with plans to do a drugs test in her home of New Mexico, blissfully unaware of how this would be manipulated to Angelina Lucas's advantage. Angelina's team would use the fact that Lindenmuth had not provided a post-fight sample to get the fight result overturned to a no contest, and they then publicly began claiming that Lindenmuth had actually failed a test and refereeing errors in the fight had been identified, leading to the decision being overturned by the WBA. This was a completely false narrative, and Lindenmuth had never been given the opportunity to complete a drugs test, but the WBA had immediately overturned the result to a no contest. Outraged at the injustice, Lindenmuth would take and pass a drugs test in America, and common sense prevailed when the WBA again changed the result, this time back to a Lindenmuth win. But for some reason, the bout is still listed as a no contest on BoxRec to this day, which is the world's best source for boxing record keeping, and it's a fact that Angelina no doubt uses to cling onto the narrative that she didn't take her second defeat. I genuinely have no idea why BoxRec have decided to keep this as a no contest, when the WBA website clearly states that it was a Lindenmuth win. And to add further insult to injury, the Angelina Lucas affiliated promoter of the event has never paid Lindenmuth anything for the fight. This was just another chapter in the ugly career of Angelina Lucas, and it's a story that marches on unabated by her shocking behavior. She is still actively boxing as recently as December 2025, where she won a fight in Dubai in surprisingly uncontroversial fashion, albeit against a very limited opponent. There are also indications that she will be taking her grift to another level. As per her BoxRec profile and her Instagram posts, she is currently in the United States and seems to have an eye on landing a fight stateside. This move presents an issue for her, as while boxing in America is far from clean, it is also nowhere near as easily corruptible as places like Kazakhstan, Turkey, or Egypt, where she and her team were allowed significantly more control than they will get if she fights under a reputable promoter in America. I also perhaps naively believe that it will be harder for her to find a referee willing to ignore her constant, blatant cheating in America, but then again, this is boxing, so who really knows? In many ways, Angelina Lucas perfectly encapsulates the modern social media boxer, with the millions of followers and thousands of likes on her posts, allowing her to build a profile big enough that she has drawn in thousands upon thousands of dollars from her catalogue of sponsors. But while her Instagram looks amazing and legitimate, any illusions of greatness are shattered the moment you actually watch her fight. But I'd bet at least 95% of her following has never actually watched her fight beyond the clips and posts that she lets them see on her Instagram. If America is the next chapter in her career, it will be interesting to see her approach, because we know for sure that she is not good enough to compete at the elite level, and rampant cheating and corruption can surely only carry you so far. Though given her lofty BoxRec ranking and the numerous belts she has won, it would not be surprising to see her con her way into a fight on a major network, especially with the investment slowly trickling into women's boxing from the likes of Jake Paul and others. I can only hope, as an avowed hater, that if she does make that step up, she gets absolutely flattened and sent back to Kazakhstan in tears, in the same state that she left her opponent after she bit her into submission and then snubbed her afterwards. This is a career as embarrassing as any I have ever seen. The end. Thank you so much for watching the video, and please drop a like if you enjoyed to help the channel. Also check out my last video on the career of the worst fake boxer I have ever seen. Subscribe for more videos just like this one, and I will see you in the next video. Peace.